So I put a video the other day and I called it EveryDayMaya. And the idea behind it is not only to try and do tutorials every couple days, every week, or something like that, but also just to be about the language of working with Maya every day and the things you run into all the time. Um, some of it's going to be very simple stuff like the one I'm doing today, but the idea is just like when you work with this every single day, like these are the things you pick up on, little tips and stuff like that. It's nothing groundbreaking, but just sort of just like here's how I use Maya all the time. Um, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was actually selections, and I know this is super 101, but I think in some ways it'll be kind of helpful. So the first thing I want to talk about is just that I am a big proponent of marquee selections, right? So that's just the big drag window. It's called a marquee selection. I like that better than trying to um, do like little selections on things. I find I often miss them, like I am right now. But if I go in there and just do a bunch of little tiny uh, cube selections, it's actually a little bit faster for me. Well, it's hard to do while I talk. But you notice I selected some CVs I didn't want in the back, or verts. That's okay, I can just quickly drop them. And that's what I like about the marquee selections, is that you can sort of do stuff really fast and dirty and still get what it is that you wanted to get. You know what I mean? Whereas if I wanted to go and select these guys individually, it might have been a little bit pain in the butt. There is the tab to select, but I'll still go back in there, and I find it's much easier to just do a little marquee select, double check that, make sure that's all I got. Often I'll use the move tool just to center my controls and see where I am. See, I got one back there I didn't want. Um, it sounds counterintuitive and slower because there's a lot more clicks and stuff, but it's more just like you're doing a lot of quick movements, and it's like a sloppy way to select, but it often can get you what you want a lot faster. And there is lasso select as well. If I hold down Q, go to the left mouse button, I have my lasso select. I'm not good at that. So I like the, where is it? Oh, where'd it go? Marquee select. So much better. Oh. Also, sometimes you might get stuck in paint select. That happens to me all the time. Just hit tab. Oh, unless you're really stuck in it, like I am now. I think that's paint select. Nope. There we go. I'm back in marquee select. I've seen some people shut down Maya when they get stuck in that. I used to do that. I'd be like, how did I get into this? And then just close Maya, delete my prefs, start all over. You can just kind of play with the controls. Also, if you hit your tool settings, you can always reset your tool and go back to normal. I just have a hotkey with Alt-P to take me there because I find that I open that thing up all the time. So anyway, just real quick, Shift select is toggle. I think most people know that. Control is to drop. I think most people know that. Shift control is to add. So even if you have things selected, it'll add that selection without dropping, whereas Shift is going to toggle those selections. Most people know that, but it's just one of those things. I'm like, might as well throw it out there because some people don't. And of course, that works on an object level. As well as component level. So the next thing I want to look at was pick walking. And you can pick walk on both hierarchies as well as components. So if I go to component mode here and I just select one of my vertexes, I can walk around. I'm just using the arrow keys, and from what I remember, it's screen space. So it can sometimes get confused. I don't think it works on faces, but if you and it works differently on edges. I'm not actually using pick walk here. It's more just a built-in function of Maya to pick edge loops or edge rings, whereas this is actually pick walking, which is a little bit different. But you can also pick walk hierarchy. So if I take each of these guys, oops, and I parent them. Oops, got hot. There we go. Parent in order. oops, spell it right, there we go. Now I have just a basic hierarchy that I can, there we go, walk up. And you notice when I try and walk down that I get stuck on that first cube. And basically what's happening is when you pick walk down, oops, I gotta show shapes here. I'm going to the shape node rather than the next transform node. So transform is that guy you have that says TRS, transit, rotate, scale, visibility. And then the shape node is the stuff that tells it what it is. But what then you can do is walk left and right to get to your siblings. So it's kind of easier to see this in a joint chain. So if I go in here, just create a skeleton. There we are. And I'll just split that. Something like this, right? So walking up, walking down. When I get to this joint here, you notice I have 3 possible siblings, so if I can either go left or right to go through those siblings there. So if it's a hand or something like that, it makes sense. But you will notice if I'm down a couple joints in the, let's just call this the middle finger, and I go left or right, nothing happens because they don't actually have true siblings. But these guys actually all share the same parent, and so they all are true siblings from each other. So when you're dealing with like a hierarchy that has shape nodes in it, like controls or shape nodes and stuff like that, that's where you're going to want to be able to walk side to side to get those actual DAG nodes or transform nodes rather than the shape nodes. So another way that comes into play is if I have something constrained, like this cube, I'm also going to put a scale constraint on it. When I grab that cube, if I arrow down, first I get the shape node, but then if I arrow to the left or right, I'm going to get the other constraints. So there's a scale constraint, and there's a parent constraint parented underneath that cube. You can see that in the outliner. So when you watch people and they work really fast, they're like, oh, I'm just going to delete the scale constraint, and I'm just going to delete this parent constraint. That's how they're doing it, just arrowing down and over. And it's good to know that. Also, if you want to get the shape node to actually interact with, you can do that as well. So if I go here and arrow down and then control A real quick, I'm in the shape node. Now I can go in there and mess with its render stats and things like that very quickly and easily. With that in mind, if I go here and put a, let's say a lattice on my sphere here, let's get a few more divisions on it. You'll notice that if I arrow down, I get the shape node itself. It's actually named pSphere shape 1, which is a little bit wrong because it should be pSphere 1 shape, no big deal. But if I arrow over, I also have an orig node. Now the orig node was the original sphere shape node that has been hidden. And if you go down here, you see intermediate object. That's from that deformation that it was connected there. So if I arrow to the left, arrow to the right. So here's the hidden shape node. Here's the one that's actually being deformed. If I go in here and deform my lattice, go down there and let's show that original shape node, you see the difference. So that's the original shape node before deformations, and this is the one after. And the only real difference, as far as you're concerned, for selection, is the intermediate object is toggled on to hide that object. Incidentally, you can also pick walk on lattices. The thing to realize though is you have a third dimension going on. So I'm using actually pick walk, what is that, down. I just set it that way personally. And then left and right and up and down. Now the thing to remember is that's based on the S, T, and U of the lattice, not on like front to back or anything like that. So with that in mind, you're walking along, say it could be the T divisions, I'm not even sure, then the U divisions and the S divisions. So if this thing is, rotated or whatever, it's going to be different. It's not going to be like screen space. Speaking of selections in the channel box, one thing to remember too is that when you select things over here in the channel box, you're actually selecting them in in Maya as well. Um, if I open up the, oh boy, if I open up the node editor and look at what I have selected, I actually have the FFD and the object. So let me do that again. Blink. So now you'll see that I should have the sphere in there too. Yeah. So I actually have the FFD one and the sphere selected, and you don't forget about like your control selects and that sort of thing. So often, if I want to get like some of my input history here, I'll select in the outliner, sorry, channel box, and then just control deselect the sphere, and now I'm left with just my FFD1 there, so I can, change how it works and things like that. I see a lot of times people do that where they'll go and select like this, and now they know they have two selections. They'll load the attribute editor and maybe like go to find it and then hit the select button. It drives me crazy. So yeah, you can just go in here and like, oh, I want the polysphere. Great, I've got the polysphere. Or if I have any other sort of deformers, and that's inputs rather than parenting. So you'll notice it's under inputs, and if I arrow down, I get the shape. So it's just to be something to be aware of. Now the next thing I want to talk about is pickwalk add, and this was a script that was added, I think, in like Maya 1.0. It's super old, but what's really great about it is you can actually set hotkeys so that you can add to your selection. You probably make a pickwalk remove as well. So you can do grow selection and shrink selection, things like that. But this is specific to your pickwalk, right? So I'm just going to pickwalk to the right a couple times, and I can still pickwalk the way I would normally, and then pickwalk to the left. And this works on everything you can pickwalk on, which is pretty cool. So I can go in here and let's go up, and then let's go over and grab like just the middle section there like that, and now I can move that around. Ordinarily trying to get that would be kind of a pain in the butt, so it's nice to have, and that'll work with regular parenting as well. So let me parent these guys up, and now I've got them selected. So if you have a joint chain or something like that, it'll do that as well, which is really nice. Right, so you can also, of course, use it when you pick left and right, or in multiples. So where I found it very handy is if you have like, let's say a very big joint chain, I can select a large portion of that without selecting the whole thing and just get the parts that I want. There is, select HI, which I use constantly as well. As you can see, it's in my marking menu for my hotbox. So I'll use that a lot. I try to be careful with that because if I do have like a full rig set up and I use select HI, I'm going to get everything that's underneath there, and I don't always want that. So I have controls and stuff like that that I want to add to. If I use select HI, I might be grabbing shape nodes and anything that's grouped underneath there, and constraints and all that sort of stuff. So I like the pickwalk add because then I can just go in there, and it may seem like it takes a long time, but I'm really just hammering the up arrow, and now I've got everything. So if you think of that as like a control rig rather than joints, you can see how that can be beneficial with something with like a very long tail or even fingers or something like that. I use it all the time. And it's just pickwalk add.mel. You can probably find it on high end. If not, I can make a link for it. So the next thing I want to talk about was custom pickwalking, and I just quickly deleted and recreated these cubes, and right now they have no hierarchical information to each other. But what I can do is use under control, there's this thing called parent controller and tag as controller. They do slightly different things. So if you set something as a controller, Maya now marks that node as something that has special properties. And in this case, we can do custom pickwalking, which is what the parent controller does. So if I go here and grab these two guys and say parent controller, and now if I arrow up, I'm going to get that cube that's above. If I arrow down, I'm actually going to get that transform again, rather than getting the shape node like I would normally get if these guys were just parented. And so what's cool about that is you can then give your animators specific parents that they can walk between without getting bogged down in all those intermediate shapes and shape nodes, and if you have offset nodes in there, they're not going to get it. So if you pretend that it's a bunch of controls, that's where that comes in super handy. And again, pick walk add works with that. Now they're not connected, but the pick walk add still works. So another interesting thing you can do with it that's different from regular pick walking. Yeah, I should be hitting G. I know. G. There we go. There. You know, you still have siblings, so since all three of these guys are parented underneath this cube here as its parent, they now become siblings, and I can left-right between them. But because it's custom pick walking, I can also walk between the siblings of those siblings. They're all like a same leaf level of the hierarchy for the pick walk, if that makes sense. This is something that's kind of good, but also kind of weird, so it's just something to be aware of. But if you think of like this was like a hand rig, I could then go in there and grab all three finger joints of a small three-fingered hand, and could rotate those, and those would rotate my rig or whatever it is I wanted to do. The only thing about the tagging stuff is that there's no native way right now to shut it off and turn it back on. It's either all or nothing. So once you put it on there, you're stuck with it. So if you have a complex rig that you want to, you know, I want to get the shape node, well, in this case I can, but if I want to get the shape node of this cube, I'm sort of stuck into having to delve into, you know, my library here, or select it over here. Sorry, outliner. I don't know why I call it library. You know, it's hard to select the shape node. I can go into the attributor and get the shape node, but that's a real pain in the butt. Oops, wrong hotkey. So I wrote like a quick little script, yeah, to save me. But there's lots of different ways that people take care of that, where they sort of set it up so they can be run at the very end of creating a rig, so they're not stuck with the custom pick walking. And I haven't fully fleshed it out, but basically the idea is it remakes the connections and breaks the connections for those pick walks, so you can go back and forth between them. I haven't tried it too much in production yet, so I'm not sure how solid that is. One of the other things I wanted to point out is that when I make lattices, I almost always end up placing them, maybe scaling them a little bit bigger or something like that, and that's where that pick walk add comes in very handy. So you won't always have your transforms on your objects. And so if I make a lattice on this, you'll see that it's now a, you know, world space lattice. It's not quite right. But if I just control right click, I'm going to get that lattice base as well. I can now go in there and align this the way that I want it to be. And that's something I find I do constantly. Almost every time I create a lattice, I'm always like right click, control, and or you know, control right, so I can angle it the way that I want to angle it. Okay, so I think that touches on everything that I wanted to talk about. That's you know, there's tons of things about picking you can learn, but those are some of the things that I think are good entry level, and also some of the things that I think are helpful. So hopefully this helps someone, and thanks.